Welcome to episode 33 of our series on the origins and meanings of Appalachian and Southern surnames. As we've mentioned every week during this series, there are thousands of surnames in these regions. To make our task more manageable, we're focusing on pre-Civil War surnames, the old ones. That's because the Industrial Revolution of the late 1800s scattered thousands more names across the fruited plains. And some of them, no doubt, made their way into major cities in the South and certain coal mining areas in central Appalachia. Each of the family names that we'll examine today, as always, was requested by members of our YouTube community. You might note that I discuss surnames in the order that I received them, and I appreciate the opportunity to serve as a resource for you. I also appreciate your patience as I make my way through the names still on our list. And they still keep coming in. By request, I'm posting an email address to the Vanntage Point in the description so you can request a surname catalog. It contains all the surnames that we've covered up through this week. So, today on the Vanntage Point, we'll be talking about 9 Appalachian and Southern surnames. They'll take us from America to Ireland, Scotland, England, France, Holland, Germany, and Scandinavia, the land of the Vikings. I hope you'll join me. Let's get started. Number 1, beach. I know what you're thinking. Life's a beach. A name like beach must be associated with some sandy shore and frothy surf. I'm afraid that our ancestors were a bit more practical than looking for a gnarly or tight curl or a place to catch a few rays. Beach is an English surname for one who lived near a beech tree. And looking around the other countries of the Isles and in Europe for pockets of the surname, I came up empty. This makes it easy for us in America to call beach an English surname. Number 2, Carr. When I received this request, my memory went straight to one of my favorite romantic films of all time. Do you remember An Affair to Remember? I sure do. Aside from a compelling acting job by Cary Grant, the person who stole mostly every scene she was in was Deborah Carr, a Scottish-born actress. She adopted Carr as her stage name. It had been in her family for several generations. Carr has 2 origins. One is Scandinavian to identify a dweller at a marsh. The other is Gaelic for a fort. In addition to Scotland, Kurd is plentiful in Ulster. I think that Kurd families in Appalachia in the South could well be Scottish or of Scots-Irish derivation. Number 3, Hedger. If there's one thing that I greatly admire about the cultural landscape of Great Britain and Northern Ireland is the use of hedges to beautify properties and locate property boundaries. Did you know that there was once an occupation that was dedicated to growing living fences? Yes, there was. The surname Hedger was given to an Englishman who grew and managed hedges. Despite the ubiquitous nature of hedges in villages and cities across the Isles, the surname Hedger appears to be concentrated in England. It's not found among the more common surnames in Wales, Ireland, or Scotland. I think we're safe in calling Hedger an English surname. Number 4, Bowles. I must admit that when I see the name Bowles, it triggers memories of Bowles Avenue in Littleton, Colorado. It's a major thoroughfare in that city and it ends at the picturesque Front Range. Beautiful country. Just as Hedger was an occupational name, the same is true for Bowles. Bowles. This English name was given to a person who made bowls for a living. You might note that in Ireland this name also appears as Bowler. Bowles is not found among the common surnames in Wales or Scotland. I think we should consider Bowles to be an English surname, while Bowler is most likely an Irish name. Number 5, Kurd. As one might expect from this surname, it was originally found in Wales as well as Sussex and Kent. If you guessed that it was an occupational name for one who sold dairy products, you'd be correct. It's not found among the more common surnames in Ireland and Scotland, so I think we're safe in calling Kurd an English surname with possible Welsh origins. Number 6, Mercer. Does the name Roy D. Mercer ring a bell? How about his famous question, "How big an old boy are you?" If you traveled the interstates back in the 1990s across the South, including Oklahoma, you might have heard Phil and Brent's prank calls in the name of R.D. Mercer on the radio. Their CDs were sold in truck stops. When caller ID arrived, their show faded from the airwaves for obvious reasons. Interestingly, Mercer was introduced into the Isles by the Normans. It comes from the French word mercier, a haberdasher. America's most famous haberdasher was Harry S. Truman. In some ways, Truman's personality was a lot like that of the salty character created by Brent and Phil, not Phil. Aside from that, a haberdasher is one who trades in men's clothing. No wonder R.D. Mercer asked, "How big of an old boy are you?" Except for Wales, the name is spread throughout the Isles. It's been in Scotland since the late 1200s, not the 800s, but the 1200s. In Ireland, Mercer and Mercer with a French spelling are found. Mercer is more prevalent in Ulster. In Appalachia in the south, there's a good chance that Mercer is of Scots-Irish origin, but a paper trail is needed to verify the origin of your specific line. Number 7, Gardner. As with Deborah Carr, who I mentioned earlier, it's not hard to recall the regal beauty of North Carolina's own Ava Gardner when hearing or reading the name Gardner. Some of you are thinking, "Van, you need a life outside of old movies." Well, that's probably true. I grew up in a time when books, newspapers, 3 TV channels, and movies were the way that we learned about the world beyond our own communities. We were too poor to vacation anywhere besides visiting relatives back home. By the time I was 12, I had driven my grandparents from Oliver Springs, Tennessee to Cherokee County, North Carolina and back on several occasions. When I learned that Gardner originated as a French surname derived from jardin or garden, it was clear that the earliest gardeners must have been exceptional farmers. It was introduced into England by the Normans and spread to other parts of the Isles. The surname's been in Scotland since the 1200s. In Ireland, it can be of English or Scottish origin, so I think that Americans would need a paper trail to determine the place of origin for their specific line of gardener. Number 8, Kendrick. In its deepest roots, we find that Kendrick is derived from the Scandinavian or Dutch forms of Henry. Kendrick, however, is a contraction of the Scottish McKendrick. In Munster, Ireland, it can appear as Kenrick. In northwestern Ulster, McKendrick is more common than Kendrick, but it's not found among the more common Welsh surnames. There's a good chance that Kendrick folk in Appalachia and the South have Scottish or Scots-Irish ancestry. By the way, if you enjoy American football and Christian movies, put together hopefully, check out the films produced by Georgia's own Kendrick brothers, especially Facing the Giants, one of my favorite films of all time. Number 9, Dishner. Our last surname today takes us the furthest away from the South. We could find ourselves in Germany where the name was originally Titscher. It was an occupational name for a carpenter. It could also be an Irish name for a maker of dishes. At the end of the day, I think one would need a DNA test or paper trail to determine the origin of your line of Dishner. You might note that most Y chromosomes are distinctly different between Irish and German populations, so that's the reason why I mentioned DNA. Well, friends, that's all I have for you today. I hope you got something meaningful out of our discussion. If you did, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. It really helps a whole lot. I invite you to check out all the videos on the Vanntage Point. In addition to the Surnames of Appalachia and the South series, they cover a wide range of topics, including a series on the Dust Bowl, 1930s. I hope to pick up work on Mary Queen of Scots series, so please check out part 1 if you haven't seen it. I'm waiting for the views on part 1 to pick up before I move on to part 2. No reason to do that if nobody's watching. If the man warrants it, I'll be back soon with another episode on the Surnames of Appalachia and the American South. I hope to see you then. God bless you and yours. Bye-bye.